Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's WEConnect International webinar. My name is Maggie Berry, and I'm the Executive Director for WEConnect International in Europe, and I'm delighted that you've joined us today for the webinar, How to Build a Brand with Impact. Our presenter today is Miriam Tyrangiel, the Strategy Director and founder of Tea & Frost, a brand strategy and design studio and a WEConnect International women-owned business. Tea & Frost build powerful brands that impact and engage their clients, and their clients have ranged from large corporates to startups and small businesses. Miriam is going to be looking at brand, a buzzword that can mean so many different things. She's going to debunk some of the common myths and look at what makes today's super brands so powerful. To keep background noise to minimum, participants will all be on mute, so please do use the chat functionality to ask any questions that you might have, and there'll be time for discussion and Q&A at the end. Miriam, I think, is going to talk for maybe about 40 minutes or so, and the session is being recorded, so you will be able to listen back to it again should you wish. So, Miriam, thank you so much for presenting for us today. I am going to hand the presenter rights over to you, and so you can start. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much for the introduction, Maggie. Thanks everyone for joining us today to this session, How to Build a Brand with Impact. So as Maggie said, my name is Miriam. I'm a strategy director and co-founder of Tea & Frost. So this is what we'll cover today. First, I'm going to give you a brief introduction to my agency, Tea & Frost. We'll then talk about why branding matters, why is branding so important. And then we'll talk about learnings from today's super brands. So we'll be looking at some younger brands and discussing what we can learn from them. And then we'll be talking about the managing the branding process, where we've got some specific things to think about, do's and don'ts, that you can hopefully apply day to day in your own organizations. And then I've got a special offer to listeners who have dialed in today, and then there'll be plenty of time for Q&A. So we'll broadly move from a high level, more conceptual aspects of branding to very concrete tips and things for you to think about. So let's dive in. So Tea & Frost, we are a small branding agency based in London. We have designers, strategists, copywriters, art directors, web developers, digital marketing specialists on our team, so really a mixed team of expertise. As an agency, we build brand experiences. What does this mean specifically? Well, we work on lots of different brand touch points, from brand identity work to websites, print, the environment, and we have a strong process in place that combines strategy and design, which we believe is critical to creating engaging branding. On this slide, I've just got a bit of an overview of some of our recent work. So our clients range from small tech startups to a luxury boutique hotel in the Caribbean, a coffee brand in Australia, a global travel consultancy, and others. So they're generally small and medium-sized businesses, although I would say that everyone on our team has experience with working on large corporate projects. So we've all worked in leading larger agencies in London. Obviously, there's much more. There are many more examples of our work on our website, teandfrost.com, if you're interested. But enough about Tea & Frost. Let's talk about today's topic, branding. Oh, for some reason the slide has disappeared for me.
Miriam, hi, I see it looks like somebody's dialing in and taking over. Can you see your screen again now?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, that's fine. I'll try and sort that out in the background. Thanks.
Okay. Okay, I hope everyone can see that. So the slide says why branding matters. So yeah, why does branding matter? Maggie, I think you need to make me the presenter again.
I do. I'm just working that. Hold up.
So what is a brand? Fundamentally, very often people think of a brand as a logo or as an ad campaign, and I would say logo and advertising are very important components of branding, but we really need to expand our definition. And one definition that we really like to use is by Wally Ollins, who was a brand guru, and he defined branding for channels, if you like: behavior, product, environment, and communication. Behavior is how the company's people behave internally and externally. Product, what the company makes and sells. Environment, the physical environment surrounding the brand. For communication, how the brand tells people about itself and what it's doing. And some of these channels will be more important than others depending on, your business, what industry you sit in. As an example, I mentioned earlier, we've got a client who is a boutique hotel. Obviously, communication is very important for them because they're based on an island and they need to be able to tell the world about who they are and what's there. But for a hotel, behavior is also critical. So, how the staff behave at the resort, and the environment, obviously, how the environment is set out, what the rooms look like, and we really think that these are very important factors that make up a brand. So it's not just the communication, as we traditionally might think of a brand. There are other things that make up the brand as well. Now, why are brands important? So, example on the right-hand side, we've got two cars. They're both white. They're very, very different. And so, what brands do is they build trust. They also make a product distinctive. So they tell you this is different from the other one. They also reflect on the buyer, and I think this is actually often underestimated how important this is. So, in a car, it's very clear, if I'm driving a VW, what does that say about me? But also in a B2B context, that can be very important. So, for example, if you're the owner of a consultancy, if a client buys a service from you, what does that say about them? So if they have to make a case to their boss about, buying these consultancy services, what does that say about them? So they reflect on the buyer. They are a powerful internal motivator. Google is a really strong example for that. Google's a very powerful employer brand. They make a product memorable. And so, in short, we might say that brands simplify choice. In a world of millions of options, brands help us decide what's for me and what isn't. Branding is also about delivering on a promise. So the best brands are coherent in what they do and what they represent. The best brands have an ethos and they live by it, and their actions reflect that promise. And one of the most famous examples for this, perhaps, is Nike, which everyone's very familiar with. Nike has a bold and recognizable promise, which it doesn't reinvent every couple of years. So the meaning of the brand of getting up and doing it and achieving victory has stayed consistent over years and years. And I think that brands fail when they say something and do another, and that's not really the case with Nike. They've really been consistent in terms of their ethos for many years, and that permeates everything they do, from their advertising to the way their stores look, to the corporate culture internally. And some examples of some of their communications over the years here: taking it easy won't take you anywhere, and it's really that ethos that permeates the whole organization. Now, Nike is a commonly used branding example, and for today I wanted to talk about 3 younger brands that have been really successful in the last 5 to 10 years, and analyze what's made them so powerful from a brand perspective. The first brand I wanted to talk about, wonder if anybody can guess what we mean by this image. Well, it's Airbnb. Now, there were lots of services that were similar to Airbnb before. but none had as much success as Airbnb. And in some ways, we sometimes think that Airbnb is the world's most trusted brand, because if you thought about what Airbnb does and you thought about a factual description of the company's services, you might say something like, it's a website that allows you to book accommodation at a private person's home anywhere in the world. Now, if you just read that cold and you didn't realize Airbnb stood behind it, you might say, is that a good idea? You know, do I want to stay at a private person's home anywhere in the world? I don't know anything about them. It could be a sinking house in a river, just as you see here. So the question is, how does Airbnb win trust? Well, we've dissected Airbnb's model, and it really works on 3 levels, and this is based on Simon Sinek's theory, Start with Why. It's a TED Talk, but also you can also watch it on YouTube, I think, and he's written a book where he says that the most powerful brands operate from the inside out, and they start with why. And I really encourage you to watch this video later on. I think Maggie might be posting it later. But essentially, again, if we looked at the factual description of what Airbnb does, it's a website that allows you to book accommodation at a private person's home. How do they do that? They host and guests create a personal profile with reviews after each trip. And why do they do what they do? Airbnb say that they want to create a sense of belonging wherever you travel. And it's really only through these 3 layers that have made the brand as powerful as it is today. And this ethos works because it lives and breathes across the business. If you go on their website and you look at their values as a company, one of the things they talk about is be a host. So collaborative, anticipates the needs of others, prepared, authentic, listens, advocates, eliminates interference for others, considers the whole person, humble. So a company that lives and breathes its values as Airbnb does and has a specific mandate to want to be a host to others, you know, within the company, but also encourage its own hosts to be hosts. That's what builds that trust. And again, it's kind of it's a proof for why brands need to be thinking about a larger reason for being, an ethos and a purpose, rather than just you know, providing a facility to book accommodation. It's really a much bigger sense of meaning that drives Airbnb's success. And so lesson number 1 from this is for you, why does your product exist? Think about the why, not just the what. Now, obviously, this is really easy to say. It takes lots of research and thinking, but when it's done right, it makes all the difference. Example number 2, not everyone would have heard of Frank's Body, which is a brand from Australia. Their core product is a coffee body scrub. They've done $20 million in sales last year. And yeah, within a short space of time, Frank has become a massive success story. And why is that? Why has Frank risen to such success so quickly? Well, in a world of scientific and corporate jargon, Frank does what it says. It's a bold, honest, and refreshingly different kind of beauty brand. And if you look at some of their language on their packaging, on their website, and read how they talk about themselves, that becomes very clear. So, for example, they say, to be frank, I'm a simple coffee scrub, and I can't wait to be on you. Get naked, get dirty, get rough, get clean. So, yeah, it's a very different approach, very direct, very unusual for a beauty brand. And fun and humor is a big part of Frank's brand. Again, I've got some more examples here of how they talk about themselves. Coffee-based skincare that rubs you the right way. All of my products contain coffee. because every babe needs something to undo the fact that she hasn't slept in 10 years. And again, it's kind of how they talk about what they do, but it's also the product itself that, you know, contains only natural, a small number of natural ingredients. So it's how the brand behaves, what the product is, and the way the brand talks about what it does. It's this combination that makes it such a success. So lesson number 2, think about what your brand personality is and how you can amplify those character traits. And one exercise that we like to do with many of our clients is this character trait scale, where we like to map where the client currently sees themselves on these scales and where they would ideally like to be. Sometimes it's also useful to think about your industry or your competition. So, you know, do your peers appear very modern or very or more traditional? Are they quite reassuring in their appearance or more exciting? And then you can map yourself against each of those traits, and this might be something useful that you might want to do after this webinar. But essentially what I would also encourage you is to think about some of those values in a bit of an extreme way as well, because being in the middle of everything doesn't really define you. So for Frank Body, fun and humor is a really big part of their brand, and the reason they're so successful is that they've gone all the way with it. They've really they've really amplified their personality, and that's something I would encourage encourage you to think about. Third example is Deliveroo. Now, there are many food delivery businesses in the UK, in the US, across Europe, and beyond. But to us, Deliveroo really stands out from a brand perspective. And a number of reasons for this. Firstly, they use a really specific recognizable character, the kangaroo. They've also got a consistent and identifiable style of photography. Again, you can see that here at the bottom of the slide. And then they've also got a set of colors and an illustration style that they use with a very high level of consistency. And so the lesson for this is use identifiable brand assets to create a more distinctive and recognizable brand. And one of the things I would encourage you to do is maybe cover the logo of your own brand or your own organization and think about whether it's still identifiable and distinctive. So again, the point being, it's not just about a logo. It's about all these other touch points that create the brand. Here's an example of something that we've worked on quite recently. This is a car insurance startup called By Miles, where the idea is that you pay for, you only pay for the miles that you use in your car. So if you only drive 5 miles a week, that you only pay for insurance for those 5 miles. And so, the logo animates. So when you land on the website, it'll say, by 5 miles, by 10 miles, and it'll animate with those numbers. But we've also developed an illustration style, a specific set of colors, fonts, and together all of that creates a really ownable style that makes the brand distinctive compared to its peers. So those are the 3 lessons from some of today's super brands. I now wanted to go into some specific do's and don'ts that you can hopefully apply within your own organizations. And the first thing is follow a good process. So very often we get clients coming to us asking us, to just design their website, and actually very often you actually need a strong foundation in terms of strategy and identity before you get onto designing the website. So this is an example of the process you might go through if you're designing a website. You might want to explore the competitive context of your brand and your target audience, and define the values that you want to convey, the message you want to send. You might then want to work on your identity. So again, that's the logo, the fonts, the color, the imagery, and the illustration style. And then you might want to execute that identity on the website and other touch points. And following a good process is really, really important. Otherwise, you just end up with something that's superficial and probably needs to be, and isn't engaging internally, and needs to be changed after a year. We've had a number of clients who've come to us not having been through a proper process, and it's really, really important that you follow a good process. Now, obviously, the scope of each of those stages will vary depending on the nature of the challenge. And ahead of the webinar, somebody asked about fees associated with branding, and I'll touch on that a little bit later on as well. But fees really vary depending on what the challenge is and what you need to work on. So, for example, on the strategy side, we could be doing team interviews to explore your differentiators, your competencies internally, how you're perceived externally, your weaknesses as a company. We might want to do some research with your customers. We might want to do competitor research. We might research trends depending on what industry you're in. We might want to analyze the category you operate in. And we might want to run some team workshops as well to bring all of this together. On the identity side, again, sometimes a company doesn't want to work on a photography style and might just want to use illustrations. So you don't need to worry about photography that much, but there are lots of different things that you can take into account there. And then execution-wise, again, it's kind of, you might just want to work on a website. You might want to work on stakeholder engagement. So something more akin to what's made Airbnb so successful, working on your internal brand and message. You might want to work on your advertising and communications, or your environment. So, for example, if you're a hotel, you might want to think about the signage and those touch points of branding. I really do believe that galvanizing stakeholders is key. The best brands live from the inside out. And at TM Frost, we like to involve the team at the beginning and in between in discussions about values, internal strengths and weaknesses, brand positioning. Not as much on the design side, though, because you otherwise risk designing something by committee, which can be really, really dangerous. So what you don't want is everybody weighing in and you start talking, because design is something very subjective as well. And you don't want everyone to start weighing in on, oh, well, but that's not my favorite color, and why are we using that font? You need to be trusting the branding agency to be doing a good job on that, and then have a small team of decision makers internally to work with the agency. So I would say engage the team, very important, but I would also say the engagement should be more about the strategy and thinking about the values that you want to communicate rather than the design side of things. Pick the right branding partner. So I'm not sure who's on the call today, but obviously who you want to work with will vary massively depending on your budget and the stage you're at with your business. So if you've just got an idea and you want to test it in the market, you might be better off working with an online platform like Fiverr, where you can, literally, I think for $5 you can get a basic brand identity designed. if you're a bigger organization and you have a marketing team, you're definitely going to be working with a branding agency rather than an online platform. Some pros and cons. So using an online platform is obviously really cheap. It might be good to gather some inspiration and to help you form your own thoughts in terms of what you're looking for. Got to be very careful that they've not just copied someone else's logo, because they're essentially not paying you're not paying a lot of money, so be careful with what they're designing for you, and also obviously the quality they won't have gone through the same process as an agency would have. They would have just sat down and designed some logos within a short amount of time. A freelancer can be a really good and affordable option. Obviously, the quality can vary depending on who you're working with. Their availability might also vary because they're just one person, whereas an agency can probably shift responsibilities around a little bit more easily, whereas if a freelancer is booked up for the next 2 months, that's it. With a branding agency, there's generally a fairly high quality control because their reputation is at stake. So for example, at T & Frost, every project we take on, we take a lot of pride in, and we want to make sure we can use it in future case studies. So we want to make sure we do the work properly. We also follow a proper process, and again, as I said, I think that leads to better and more enduring results. Obviously, that can be more expensive. Again, cost-wise, it's really hard to give a kind of concrete number here. With a smaller agency, you can be looking at a few £1,000s. A more established branding agency would probably, can easily charge 100, 200, 500,000 pounds for brand identity work. It really depends. It depends on the breadth of the scope and what you need. And is it just a brand identity? Are you looking at team engagement? Are you looking at a website design and build? How technical is the build? So with a branding agency, you'll generally get a bespoke proposal that they write for you, depending on what you need. And and those rates can vary tremendously. Now, if you're going to pick a branding partner, I've got a bit of a checklist for you here in terms of some of the things you might want to read up or check up beforehand. Firstly, portfolio. Have they, if it's an agency or freelancer, have they done all the work or just a small part of it? Always really useful to check. They might put a logo of an impressive organization in their portfolio, but did they work on that logo, or did they just work on a small flyer? What's their specialism? So the branding and marketing world can be a bit of a fuzzy landscape. So are you really dealing with a digital marketing agency that would outsource branding to a third party, or is branding really their specialism? So check what their core competency is as an agency. Then, something that's always useful is to try and ask for references. Will they let you speak to previous clients, especially clients that are in the portfolio? So if they're talking about specific pieces of work, are they happy for you to speak to those clients? Do they have one signature style, or can they adapt to match your vision? That's really important. And how many rounds of feedback do you get? So with us, we're always very transparent in terms of how many rounds of changes you can get, because then everyone's on the same page in terms of you don't want to end up, you don't want to get something and then realize there's only one round of changes included, when you know that your process internally is a little bit more complicated and you'd ideally like more time for changes and feedback. Well, I've whizzed through this. I hope it wasn't too fast. I'm obviously happy to answer questions in a second, and I can also flick back through certain slides if that's useful. But before I do that, I want to tell you about this offer today. We're offering a free brand audit to listeners of this webinar. And what this involves is you get feedback on your brand appearance. Sessions generally take about 45 minutes and can be run face-to-face ideally, or if you're not based in London, then on Skype or Google Hangouts. And essentially, we take a professional look on your external appearance as a brand and give you tangible feedback on what we think works or what could be better. And there's no strings attached to that. And if you're interested, feel free to email me on miriam@tnfrost.com. And yeah, there's limited availability of those. So if you're interested, email me. The sooner the better. And yeah, time for Q&A. So I don't know if we want to open the chat now, Maggie.
Yeah, Miriam, thank you so much, and you covered an awful lot of ground, and there was lots of information and great visuals to have a look at. I'm going to start with one question. Some of the brands that you spoke about today certainly are products. I know that many of the women-owned businesses that we work with within the WEConnect network are professional services brands. Are there differences between how you approach a brand as a consumer brand, like say the coffee scrub, or say, if one of our businesses say is maybe a coach, or they might provide legal services, or what are the differences that you might need to take into account between a product and a service?
Sure. I mean, that's a really good question. I think essentially the process is always going to be the same. So you'll still be asking the same questions, who's my target audience, who am I trying to appeal to and why, what do I stand for, what values do I embody as a brand, and that doesn't really matter in terms of, if you're a consumer-facing brand or a consultancy, you still need to think about who your audience is and what values you're trying to convey and how you distinguish yourself from the competition. Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think. Obviously, some of the touch points might be different. So, as a consultancy, your website and kind of brand collateral might be more important, like, pitch decks and so on. Consumer-facing brand, we've got a lot more, public-facing things that you need to think about. But essentially, I would say the process is the same, and the questions are similar as well. Yeah.
Okay, and I guess that there's a follow-up, because really quite early on, you said that a brand isn't just a logo or advertising, and that's, I guess, when if I think about a brand, and I guess if I think about WEConnect, I think about the WEConnect International logo. But actually, I guess it's looking at all the different elements of it, which I personally hadn't considered before. So that was that was really interesting. Now, one of the questions that we'd had submitted in advance was about how, and you touched a little bit on some of the costs. For if you're, a small business, and you referenced some of those different providers that you could work with, say from online through to, very experienced brand agencies. If somebody wanted to look at their brand and have maybe a revamp and think about, all the different elements, is there a ballpark figure about how much something like that might cost, or is it too difficult to say because it's dependent on each individual firm?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really tricky question, because a more established, larger branding agency can really charge a fortune, because they, have potentially hundreds of people working there, and they've, big reputation at stake, and they'll only take on specific projects, and they might easily charge £50,000 or £200,000. I think with a smaller agency, again, it would depend on how thorough the process would be. So ideally, for us, with every project, we would spend quite a lot of time up front understanding your position in the market, looking at inspiration, working with your team, and then designing all the different elements. And then, you could be looking at 10 grand, depending on, if you need a website as well, easily 20 or 30 grand. But yeah, it will kind of depend on what's needed.
Okay. Great. So I've opened the chat functions there. I don't know if anybody has any questions that they would like to ask Miriam this afternoon. Please do type your question into the chat box. And I will certainly, Miriam, you mentioned the video to start with why, the Simon Sinek video, so I will have a look for that and then share the link with everybody. And I thought that was quite interesting. It's why your product is this and not just what, because certainly one of the pieces of advice that we get from many of the corporate members is, you know, not just what what your company does, but it's what problem you're solving for us. And that's certainly something that I hear a lot from the procurement and the buying professionals that we work with. It is about, you know, what problem does your product or service solve for us? Now I'm just going to remind myself what was there was one other question that was asked in advance. I'm just going to remind myself what it was. Bear with me. There was one of the participants had asked a question about how you get, well, they'd asked a question, how do you recommend to get total staff buy-in? But one of your slides actually said, don't decide on a brand by committee, i.e. getting everybody's buy-in. Have you got any advice around that, about working with your internal team around brand and brand positioning?
So obviously, you know, it's the magic, my favorite answer, it depends. So obviously, you know, if you work for a larger organization, you will have a stakeholder team that you have to answer to. If you're working for a smaller company, I just, from experience, design can be very, very subjective, and you need to be very careful in terms of who you do. And also, for example, I don't necessarily advise that people, you know, when they've designed a brand identity, that they show it to their entire group of friends and get feedback, because it's a very complex thing, and sometimes people can give you a really subjective knee-jerk reaction that isn't helpful, because they don't understand your context, they don't necessarily understand what you're trying to achieve. So getting feedback can be helpful, but you need to be very careful in terms of what you listen to and what you don't. I think, but that said, I think involving the team is important. So one thing that we think that we find generally works really well is to do team interviews at the start of a project. So we'll sit down, let's say half an hour with every member of the team and have a questionnaire of things that we want to ask them. So you know, what do you value about working for the company? How long have you been there? How has it changed? How does it compare to other businesses where you've worked? What do you see as your strengths? How do you see yourself against your competition? And these short conversations, half an hour or an hour face-to-face, really make a huge difference, because people feel like they can, input on the process. And sometimes we'll then also run a number of workshops once we've conducted those interviews as well, to collate everything we've heard. But it's really less about the design at this stage and much more about brand positioning or brand promise work, to think about what do you stand for, what values do you want to communicate. Once we've done all of that, we take it onto the design stage, and there we don't necessarily involve the whole team anymore, because it can just be, it's something that's quite delicate and difficult to manage once you involve more than, 3 or 4 people, in my experience.
Yes, yes, from my own experience as well, but that's fantastic. Well, I don't think there's any more questions from people who are dialed in live. But if you do have any questions, please feel free to use the chat functionality in the next couple of moments to ask them. And then, Miriam, can you go back to your slide with the offer on? I just wanted to reiterate that for everybody. So Miriam is offering a free brand audit if you're interested, and if you're local, I guess in London, then it could be face-to-face, but equally it could be done on Skype. But you can email Miriam. Her email address is miriam@tnfrost.com to get in touch about that. And that is on offer until the 18th of August, but there is a limited number of those audits available. So if that would be of interest to you, then please do get in touch with Miriam directly. So Miriam, I don't think there's any more questions, so it just remains to me to say thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your insight today. This was really interesting. Brand and the positioning of companies, it's such a huge part of business and how you can position your organisation with clients and with the collaborators and associates and all those different kinds of stakeholders. So it's been super interesting for me. Thank you very much, and a big thank you to everybody for dialing in. The recording will be available afterwards, and I will make sure that everybody can get access to that, as well as to Miriam's slides. If you've got any questions, you're very welcome to get in touch with me, and you're very welcome to contact Miriam herself directly. But a big thank you, Miriam, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks very much.